Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. We are back for another CTO Craft Community Bytes, and this one is going to be on a topic that's raised some real interest over the last 12 months or so. We're going to be talking about European data sovereignty. And with us, we have Janne Kalliola, who is the founder of Kunti, which is a software consultancy that is specializing in things like sovereignty and general IT infrastructure and so on. He's also a chair, or I believe the chair of Code from Finland. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
It's great to have you here, Yanni. But also, I should point out, you've just written a book on this very subject, haven't you?
Yeah,
So
I did that sort of by accident that I found out that there was not a good book. So instead of trying to spend too much time finding it, I wrote it.
excellent, excellent. Good stuff. Okay, right. Before we crack on, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. There will be time for questions, as you'll see in the chat. There is a Q&A section. It looks like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. So if you'd like to bring some questions to the table, that's where to do it. Also, I'd like to say very quickly before we kick off, this year you might have seen we've got a stream of new events which are going to be happening throughout Europe and also North America. These are a new format for us. These are roundtable discussions with some subject matter experts and some CTOs who've been there, seen it, and have the T-shirt. If you're interested in finding more about that, it's called the Conversations Roadshow, I should say. We're going to be in lots of cities around the world. Please do have a look, and hopefully we'll see you at one of those. They're going to be great events. Okay, and with that, let's start talking about data sovereignty. So I guess the first question really is about definition. You know, when we're talking about data sovereignty, what's the simplest way of defining it that you give to people so that they understand the weight of it?
I think that it's sort of standing on your own feet would be the really nutshell. But in digital, we have been funding the U.S. companies' development instead of funding the European companies' development, and that is sort of helping them to build a very big competitive advantage that is growing faster actually with the advent of AI. So you could compare it with the that we in West we have outsourced a lot of manufacturing to China, and now we are sort of figuring out that we are losing also the design jobs, we are losing the skills to do things, and so forth, so forth. So this is the same, but now we are outsourcing our IT infra to States from Europe. And we will see probably the same kind of consequences if we don't revert it. And the data sovereignty is sort of umbrella term of taking back the control, taking back the your own destiny, and then figuring out how to do it yourself instead of relying to I would not say foreign because that's not the right word, but the of different economic area. Let's put it this way: that the taxes and the money doesn't circulate inside the European economic area, but it goes out and never comes back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's as much an economic thing as it is around technology and actual kind of implementation and approaches and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and political too, because that has sort of accelerated or get really a lot of attention during the past months in the political circles, and they are finding out that is America to be trusted or not? That is a question that I don't know the answer, but the sort of question that sort of nags me.
Yeah, I think compared to 5 years ago, actually no, 5 years ago we had Trump in power still, didn't we? But you know, compared to 10 years ago, we are seeing America seemingly much more insular and much more cagey about how it works with external countries and that kind of thing. But I suppose within sovereignty, it's also a little bit about resilience, isn't it? It's about
that's true, and it's I would say that the control, not in that sense that you would have the full control, but you have the knowledge and understanding, and then you have different means to act instead of that you ask somebody to act. It doesn't mean, on the other hand, that you would build your own data centers and host everything by yourself and have a huge swarm of Linux boxes on your basement. Not getting back to that, but taking a few steps back would be, and then building it again is something that I'm dreaming of. Whether that will happen, it's a good question, but I try to do it that it could happen, and that we have the base and we have the will to move forward.
Yeah, you know what? I might be looking back with rose tinted glasses on the days of having servers in my basement and running all my e-commerce and payments through an ISDN line. But you know, maybe we shouldn't be going back to that. But anyway, but yeah, Grant. So let's talk about why it's become such a big thing over the last little while. So what has changed? I mean, let's start. Let's start technologically first. What's changed over the last year or two that's made this more prominent?
I think that the technology sense, there's sort of the slow undercurrent that it's sort of drifting, that like the continental drift, that it's gradually everything has been moving to states, and that's probably because of convenience, and and that there's sort of ready-made places where you can plug your stuff and save the developer's time. So this is, if I would be nasty, and sometimes I am, so it's about laziness. And then the other one that now is accelerating faster, sort of the bigger current, is the AI. So when we move software development, deployments, DevOps, all of that happening on top of AI, or AI doing it, that we are just sort of watching it. That all happens with the American systems. We don't use Chinese AI for a number of reasons, but we don't have that kind of stigma with the American ones, and then the European ones, the Mistral, and then running it on your own computer. They are not viable options right now. So it's actually accelerating on technical sense, and then sort of economical, technical kind of crossroads there is that the data intensiveness of the world and the technologies and the how everything is now software has sort of made this very crucial question, that how we actually run our business, how we run our nations, who runs them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I wonder if you have an opinion on this. Actually, obviously, like you say, we've seen a pretty seismic shift. Well, not a seismic shift, but a seismic kind of moving to America for some of these commoditized services like cloud compute and hosting and so on. But why do you think that is? Why have the technological capabilities within Europe not exploded in the same way that they have at the American companies?
I think that while we have been doing a lot of strides with with getting a real sort of intra market, we are not there yet. There's of course I would not dare to say that we should sort of change languages, because there's a certain barrier. So that's one. There's within the European Union, there's a number of different currencies, and then the other countries in Europe, there's different legislations. We have not harmonized, or there's different kind of ways to tax. Of course, when you go to the United States, that also varies. Not the currency and not the language, but everything else sort of varies from state to state. But then they can easily pick the best state. Delaware, I guess, that is the place where everybody founds their companies. So they have the bigger market, sort of more, or let's put this way, that it's less diverse, and the diversity here is not not a good thing, that it's sort of obstacles, diversity as obstacles, and not the what the for example diversity, equality, and so forth. That not that diversity, but we just have too many problems that we need to solve to get it European wide compared to the American. That's one thing, and I think that they are sort of better at commercializing things. To be brutally honest, that for example in Finland we the Linux, most of the internet runs on Linux. It's a Finnish invention or a Finnish development. MySQL is Finnish/Swedish. If you ask Finns, it's a Finnish, and if you ask Swedes, it's a Swedish. But it's Nordic. We have produced IRC, we have produced SSH, and we have got really little money from those.
Mm.
So it's not just the market size; it's also the how you commercialize things, how you make them better, and then probably it's American companies have been bigger, and then there's the Silicon Valley. We sort of lack that. So there's all of those effects sort of chip in, and then you have like double or triple competitive advantage.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely see there being a cultural aspect to this, isn't there? You named some prime open source technologies there. Europeans seem to be more willing to spend their time building out stuff that is freely available to the community than maybe they were in the US, and also obviously some of these big cloud compute hosting, AI, etc. They've sort of been born out of large pre-existing unicorns, right? Which
Yeah.
we don't have so many of in Europe. So maybe those are the main things, kind of economically.
Yeah, the Americans are more eager to spend money. So when I was 20 years ago in a database clustering business on top of MySQL, it was really easy, or really easy, but it was easier to get things sold, open source plus something sold in the States than it was in Europe, because people just spend quite a lot of time trying to sort of replicate the thing for free here, and then the States that they just sort of shelled out the money and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if we're going to see over the next 18, 24 months, there's been this sort of much touted death of SaaS. I wonder if we're going to see a different kind of shift there, where companies are kind of sick of paying the big monthly subscriptions for things and want to kind of build their own using Claude or whatever. I wonder if we're going to see sudden sort of change in how people view hosting locally versus hosting in AWS or the incumbents.
Yeah, I discussed with the economist a few weeks ago. We are going to have an event about the data sovereignty in mid-June in Finland, and I'm getting the people lined up, or the speakers lined up, and he said that there's that kind of monopoly tax on the prices, so that there's like 2 or 3 different choices of cloud hosting nowadays, and they know it, and it would be cheaper actually to host things independent, but then it would be sort of clumsier, and that's the sort of the what do you need to that where you invest to something that okay, that's easy, and you just pay more, or whether you invest in something that should and would get better if there would be more users.
Yeah, totally. And what about geopolitically and legally? I know there have been some court cases recently and some new regulations and legislations and so on. Can you tell us a bit about what's happened recently?
Yeah, there's sort of the race of extraterritorial laws, that the laws that apply to you when you are outside of the borders of the country. So that is the like GDPR is a prime example. It's probably one of the first ones. The US has Cloud Act. So if you are a US company, you must provide certain data to the officials if they request. This is very rare that they would request, but they could request. And then you need to provide it. And then if you're a European company running executing your own software on top of that vendor, then you might be actually breaking GDPR because your vendor is following their law. So those are clashing. And we don't have yet any major cases. But then we have the US administration, the great carrot, as my younger sister tells me, is that they use their power to sort of extort people, like the International Criminal Court, that they wanted to investigate Netanyahu's war crimes, or the existence of those, that whether they were war crimes or not. They were blacklisted by the U.S. government, and they can't use credit cards. They can't use really that many services and so forth. So they have been sort of brought back to 80s, and this is sort of unprecedented. This has never happened before, and then they sort of fight with their allies too. This is also something very new. That when there was the beautiful not taxation, but the tariffs.
Yeah, the tariff.
The Russia got like 10%, and then the European countries got way more, which was sort of spooky. And it seems that when there's a strong man in the lead of a country, then they get it easier compared to sort of democratic countries where actually the government is interested in the well-being of the people and not well-being of the leaders, which I see that would be more valuable to me. And that's sort of really, really weird. That's something that I can't really wrap my head around, that what is the point? But on the other hand, I'm not running the US, so it doesn't really matter what I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that is one of the things that make the United States as sort of that you don't really know what might happen, and all the scenarios are actually on the table. That your company, if you get to the sort of teeth of that kind of government, you might actually be slapped with sanctions, and then you're screwed.
Right. I think it's a level of trust breakdown, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think when Trump got back into office, I think there was a sort of a collective right, we thought we were past this, and now right across the board, from an individual level up to a company level to a government level, everywhere it's like, well, actually, there's quite a lot of control we thought we had because we had that level of trust, and which we don't anymore. Definitely true for where we store our data, and who has access to what privileges and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And most probably it won't go away with the next elections, that the Trump is just sort of a head of a bigger cultural and value-based movement, that is sort of, that there's a chasm that is growing between the continents, and it will continue growing because we and the US people value different things. And the value chasm is also growing. So the Trump is just sort of that he was really good, and he still is really good at sort of understanding the sentiment and using that. All of these, what is happening is because that is the best way to get to the power and stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, in a way, what we're seeing from Trump is quite sort of protectionist, isn't it? It's quite protectionist of the US. There is a devil's advocate argument that looking at EU, or European, I should say, not necessarily just EU, data sovereignty, you could perceive that to be quite sort of protectionist as well.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the comparison there?
Yeah, I think that you can sort of approach this two ways. That you can have the sort of the political solution is that, yes, let's build a wall, a beautiful wall that keeps the American digital stuff only on that side of Atlantic, and that would be protectionism. I don't really like it because it would hinder invention or innovation. That we don't need to be as good as they are because we just not allow them to do it, and then it can be reversed. Political decisions can be reversed. And there is already now, Trump has instructed the US embassies and the diplomats to fight against the data sovereignty.
Right,
So,
directly.
yeah, that was Reuters had that news in a month or two or so, something like that. It was during this year, I think. So it's not a good solution and it's reversible. So the better approach, what I'm striving people to do, is that we will build a better solution. Something that is sort of a hyperscaler 2.0, I would say, that now we have monolithic, single entity controlled hyperscalers, and they have built their pricing so that it's extremely expensive to move data out that you could process somewhere else. It's quite cheap to get the data in, so they lock you in to their systems. But what we are in Code from Finland building and what I've been discussing with a number of people seem to be the next way, that there's a lot of interconnected, interoperable services provided by different companies, and they compete. That you might have like 5 different ways to host your containers and have Kubernetes there. And then you have like 3 different ways to authenticate people and so forth. And then you pick and match those and build a solution that fits you. And then you are built only for those systems. And then if one of those companies get greedy, then you have always the option to go somewhere else, to go their competitor and not change everything of your software. But there's a need that we need to resolve, that there's one single place that where you can buy those things, that you can go to some hosting or cloud provider and say, we want to buy these service, and you get them with single terms, instead of that you need to have a commercial relation with 30 different companies, have the 30 different invoices that you don't really understand that how they sort of created, but there would be one single place. But then that company actually owns the contract and maybe the hosting and maybe some service, but not all. So you could change them too if you want. And then we would get rid of the monopoly tax. We would get rid of the monoliths, and we would be able to build based on that ecosystem that what we want to build by ourselves. We could do it because we are not restrained by the cloud provider, and we could have it hosted our way. Of course, this flexibility has the downside that it's also that you need to pay more attention to interoperability, and you need to pay more attention to the fault tolerance. But then, on the other hand, we have a situation that when the Amazon US East, Virginia East or something goes down, then half of the internet is down.
Right.
And we could get away that only like 5% or 2% of the internet is down if something, let's say something in Germany is down for a while, because these things happen. So that would be that we don't have the eggs in the same single basket, but we would spread them in different places and we would mitigate risk. But we need open formats, and we need interoperability, and we need to pull these things together in Europe instead that we compete, sort of that everybody tries to build a complete solution, and then we compete, and then we have like 100 really small cloud providers that try to do everything but can't or won't be profitable. But we have a specialist companies like Bunny, for example, in Slovenia, that provides certain things only.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then let's talk practicalities here. So let's say you're a CTO in a scaling startup in Europe. What are the first practical things you should think about if you're thinking about trying to reduce that reliance on American technology and sort of data storage?
You need to first understand where you are. That is the sort of that way. If you want to change the course, you need to understand where you are, who has your data, what is, and then when you understand that, okay, my data is here in these places, because they might be in number, or you are using number of different services within the single cloud ecosystem. And bigger the company, the more you have in different places, that you are always in part. There's always something is migrated, something is always built somewhere else, and so forth. That it's a constant continuity. So then figuring out what is important, what is critical for you, what you need to have for a reason or two, what you need to have close to yourself, what is something that is doesn't really matter that much, and then based on those priorities, you should make a plan that, okay, these we want to have. For example, customer data or the data under GDPR, because it might be in the future that the max REMs against attacks the European US contract for the data transfer, that is probably invalid. I think that it's something that won't hold water, but it's so big thing that the US and Europe always try to find something. But if that would be broken like a month, there would be that kind of gray area that you don't really know. Then the things that are under GDPR would be good to have in Europe. And then sort of step-by-step fashion, you would decide that what you move, what you don't move. And then if you are building phase, then I would go to europeanalternatives.com and check that whether I can do it in Europe. Instead, I'll go to the States, because it might be actually way cheaper. And then you didn't have to care about the currency fluctuations and so forth, because it would be maybe in the same Eurozone. That won't help you in the UK, I'm afraid, but then there are some UK providers too. So you could have maybe one issue less. They could even serve in your own language. So if you are German or French, it might be that you have a German or French customer service, and they know the local laws and so forth. So there are a lot of benefits, but it requires you to have that kind of decision that, yes, I want to invest in this. And then if you invest and a lot of people invest in that, then we would get more services, and that how do we get the sort of the cycle, the good cycle going on, that we could then keep more money within our own continent, because then the chances that it comes to your country again are higher. And then we could, especially in the Nordics and in Finland, we are struggling with it, that how we can carry on with the nanny state here, that we are sort of welfare state, and everything it is really nice place to be, that most of things don't cost you that much, but then we have taxation, and now we don't have enough sort of economic activity. So it might be that we are becoming a museum, that Europe is the world's biggest open air museum in the future, and then people from more advanced locations come here to see that how the things were done and so forth. So I would like to fight against that we have so many bright engineers in this continent, we have so many bright business people. We just would pay more attention that where we source things, and we would source locally instead of globally.
Mm-hmm. So it starts with an audit. So it starts almost with taking a full look at where all your technology is and where all your data is stored and so on. Are there any frameworks or kind of paradigms for being able to assign risk to the different things that you might have in your audit? So say data, for example, or AI.
There's in my book there's a five step that it starts with the critical, and then the sort of very daily is the other end of the spectrum, and then I don't recall by the heart the three in the middle, but the sort of that the criticality and also the time sensitiveness. If it's something that it's old news after 2 hours, then it doesn't really care. But if it's really something like a patent information that you are going to get something here, you need to protect them until you get the patent, because otherwise it invalidates those things. So there's everything in between, and it's sort of up to the company right now to figure it out. I'm not huge fan of complex data classification schemes, because then you end up in situation that you have so many levels that you don't really know where to put them. So it could be that you just select three, that okay, that there's critical, normal, and nothing to worry about, and that would be enough, good sort of classification itself. And then check that what of these critical things are sort of business priority to you, and start working from those. I would not make this too much sort of scientific, because there's if you think about any bigger companies, data warehouses, lakes, and the others, there's plenty of things to do, and figuring out them in the trees is already quite a chunk of work.
Yeah, definitely. From the companies that you've worked with, where you've got in sort of had a look at where they might have gaps or might have exposure in this sort of context, have you seen any patterns in terms of what these companies tend to look at first when they're looking at sovereignty and bring things in?
The private data is because of the GDPR. That is one thing, and the other sort of interesting finding is that nobody really knows who and which ones of the vendors control the data. I typically start with going to the finance and ask that, okay, that provide me all the companies that are billing you IT related services, because they have that in single or two accounts in the books.
Mm-hmm.
And we might find out that this is a GDPR example back from the 2016, 10 years ago, that the company says that we have 3 systems that has private data. And then after going with the finance department, there were 67. So the IT probably doesn't actually know. Nobody has made the full catalog, but the finance has to know that why they are paying bills. And then you can say that, okay, here's an invoice from Microsoft Azure. What do you have there? Oh, actually, we don't know, but let's check it out. And then they figure it out. So you have the sort of full picture that this is what, and then you can cross out, okay, that is actually hardware provider. This is a provider for your telephone systems. We can move them out. But it's easiest way to understand in any bigger corporation to follow the money, because the money is the thing that they track the best.
Yeah, it's really the only surefire way to get through that shadow IT stuff, right?
Yeah,
I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, except that if you're using free services, then everybody's sort of, well, nobody knows that but then that's also about how the company has the sort of internal IT regulations and the policies and so forth, that whether you can sort of do anything, or do you need to have approval from somebody and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when everybody's working remotely, that becomes twice as hard, right?
Yeah. It's not the sort of exercise that you should take lightly.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about definitions again. So there are some other kind of adjacent terms to data sovereignty. So there's data residency, and then there's data control. How do those differ, or are they all part of the same picture when it comes to data sovereignty?
Yeah. They are sort of part of the same continuity. So the data residency is about the location, and it's because of GDPR. It has been like 10 years now with us, that where the actually resides. Then the control is sort of that who has access, because it might be that you have data in region A, and that's the residency. And then you have a subcontractor in region B, typically A being States and B being India. And then you are living in region C, that is Europe. So then you have like the residency talks about the states mostly, and the data control might be then that that it's either you sort of controlling the data like from the GDPR point of view, or then it's the Indian company having a control of the data working for you. And then the data sovereignty is sort of the umbrella term, or digital sovereignty. And then we have a digital independency that is even further up, that we would be completely or nearly independent of everybody else. And that's sort of, I think that it's sort of pipe dream that we don't easily get there. It's like the preppers that are afraid of that there will be a revolution, that there will be nuclear war, and they are building bunkers. So it feels a bit like that it's really hard to be not reliant on somebody else. Mm-hmm. But then on the sort of large strokes, the data independency, digital independency might be good goal, for example, for a country, that we have all the critical functionalities with our own hands. In Finland, this actually there's now a I don't know what is in English, but there's a proposal for new law or new legislation by the people. So they are collecting signatures, and if there's 50,000 of those, that is like 2% of the voters, then it will go to the parliament, and it's about the digital sovereignty. And that was partially kicked off because there was discussion that we would move our election data to the states. Now we are moving the pension information to Salesforce. That has been sort of in discussion. And with pension information, there goes also the subsidies that are paid to the people in the army or in the conscripts. So because we have a conscription army here, and I for example, I have been in army back in the days for 11 months. So that data, if that would go outside the border, then I'm not 100% sure whether that would be actually a wise move, that somebody else knows that who is in our army or who might be in our army. And it gets a bit sort of too nasty. Now they made a decision that the election data is not going anywhere, so the Vox Populi worked in that sense. But then there's a lot of other things that are still happening.
Let's talk about the regulations specifically. So, like the GDPR, Data Act, Gaia X. Can you tell us a bit about what's going on with those, and where we see it going? Are they market driven, or are they policy driven, etc., etc.?
I think that there's like three aspects of those. So certain regulations like GDPR are focused on the ensuring that we have privacy, and we as human beings, the people, have certain rights that you can't sell. There was some security company that asked people's passwords I think it was in London Bridge with the candy bar, and they got a lot of those. So the people are not to be trusted that they would not make stupid decisions. So the government needs to have a regulated framework to protect them from the people from the companies that might actually then use that information against the good of the people. Like we are all sold as products to the advertisers. So I don't know whether that is actually a good thing or not. The other one is fair markets, and that's where the EU is moving right now, and that is also the thing. One of the reasons why the Trump asks the diplomats to oppose this, that he doesn't really like fair markets. If they are fairer to this US, then fair is good, but if not, then it's bad. So that's probably how the thinking goes. And that the DMA and the others are for that one, that the big tech companies in the States, and then also some in Europe and some in China, have become so big that they are bigger than a lot of nations. So they must be controlled somehow. And then Then the third one is like Gaia X and the others, that they want to get the Europe on its feet. And the problem there is that the European programs are typically quite high flying,
Mm-hmm.
sort of that kind of cloudy stuff, and you have little progress and a lot of project reports, and then you can tap the people in the program can tap themselves on the back and say that good work, we got something done, but it's not really market driven. It never gets there, and there's a lot of EU projects that then when the funding ends, the project ends too, and then there's nothing nothing that would stand the test of time. And that is something that I do hope that would change, that the programs would be then sort of more business oriented. But I'm a bit skeptic because it's easier to have that kind of different kind of political ultimatums or programs that yes, we are going to do it, and let the spirit of something pull us forward, and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
So there's differences there, and then the sort of what worries me most is that if we end up as the outdoor museum and we lose our economical weight, then none of this matters, because then the European regulation actually changes the world to the better on outside Europe too, because most see that okay, that's easier to comply with regulation everywhere except Apple, that made that only certain features in Europe or certain features are available only for Europeans and certain features are not available for the Europeans, and because they think or know that they actually know better than we do. So that is something that we should fight against, that we are not the outdoor museum, because if we are, none of the regulation doesn't really matter anymore, and then we are back in the like 90s or early 2000 when we are pawns and the big corporations are kings.
Yeah, and we have our basements full of servers again.
Yeah. Those that can do it, and because I would say that the younger generation might never been working with the servers, so it might be the older generation to actually run the servers, because the people that have graduated in past 15 years, they probably have been using cloud services, and some of people that we hired in my previous company didn't know what is shell.
Mm-hmm.
Flabbergasted, but times change.
There we go. Yeah. So tell me a bit more about Gaia X in particular. What is the legislation around that? What are the specifics?
It's not legislation, but it's more of a dream of and funding to get interoperable European based services or platforms, but it has not moved that much. So it's more of sort of like being in Hyde Park, getting to on top of the box and saying something, and then nothing has changed.
Right.
It hopefully nobody get too angry of that, but I feel that it's sort of ineffective way to get things done, and the people that have been investing it, they are not happy with the progress.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it sort of gives foundation, shows that Europe cares, that we actually want to do something.
Mm-hmm.
That might not have been the best tool, so we need to have some other tool and try again.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a lobby trying to get the government to make certain changes.
Yeah. And then sort of the open formats and the others. It has good ideas, I would say, but then maybe they are not market ready, or the market is not ready for those which way you want to look at it.
Yeah. Is there something that we as technology leaders within Europe can do to support some of these movements or these lobbies, or how can we get involved and become activists for this kind of sovereignty?
Yeah, I I tend to say that you need to follow the golden rule. That who has the gold makes the rule. So if you are the keeper of the gold, that you are a buyer, that you procure something, you figure out that you are CTO and you have a procurement department, you could say the procurement department we would like to buy from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Make the procurement criteria so that there is more points awarded if it's local or if it's a European. Depends that what you can do. That if you're in public sector, you are bound by the legislation that you can't really favor anybody. But if it's a private company, nobody really cares what kind of criteria you have, as long as you don't discriminate people.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say that you get 5 extra points that if the hosting is in UK, because we want to keep the money in the UK. So you need to be idealistic in that sense. Then you need to be willing to tolerate more toil and uncertainty, because everything is not as ready as it should be. Everything is not as good as with the companies in States. But if nobody invests, it will never get better. So you need to sort of go through that kind of period of uncertainty that you don't really know that whether the system can support you fully, that is one concern, or whether it will take more time for the developers to build against this one and so forth. On the other hand, technology is sort of helping us because a lot of stuff is now in containers. Then it doesn't really matter whether you run the container in Google Cloud or Azure or AWS, or in your basement, or in some OVH, UpCloud, Hetzner, and the others in Europe. So if you are building container-based business, then you actually, it's easier for you to move, and then that advantage should be also used when your vendors start to talk about the price hikes, that we would like to increase the pricing, and you said okay, but this means that we have tested that it can run in all three major clouds, or it can run with the European ones. So actually, we must then move somewhere else. And then it might be that you reduce the monopoly tax that they might otherwise be putting to you. So I think that the best what you can do is that you are open to options, and you make your company to sort of make systems so that you can actually move. You have the flexibility and resilience to do something differently if something goes south. Pricing, the legislation, risks, data breaches, all of those. Then you could say, okay, we move somewhere else, and then we start not from scratch, but we start where we left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's about building for portability, so you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
you're not locked into a specific provider. I was doing some research around this subject last night, and I came across a really interesting term, which is sovereign washing. So almost like greenwashing or whitewashing, where the big incumbent American providers are producing kind of branded offerings like European sovereign, I think it is, kind of by IBM, then AWS and Azure. They all have these things. How can one recognize some of these sovereign washing attempts and kind of circumvent?
Yeah, the I would check the sort of that what is the legislation the provider is ultimately bound to. If it's US, then it's washing.
Mm-hmm.
That was testified by a Microsoft executive in French Parliament, that yes, we would have to give away your data. So if it's a US owned, and in some like in defense sector, it might be that it's that the company owners are from America or from Israel or from China or somewhere else. Even if the company is registered in Europe, that is no go too. So where you draw the line is something that you need to figure yourself. But you can't be true sovereign unless there's European control. From the European point of view, of course, you can be sovereign in the States but if you have European companies there, then you are not sovereign from their point of views. But we are now talking about European data sovereignty. Uh, There might be possibilities that you could have like a specific cloud instance that is operated by a European company, and then you just provide the new version of the cloud from time to time.
Mhm.
But you don't have the control of the servers. You don't have control of the software running on it. You don't have any finance control. You just sort of license your cloud. But then again, would you be forced to open backdoors to your cloud?
Right.
It's a good question.
Mhm.
Probably not right now, but in 5 years, anything can happen.
Mm. It almost sounds, this has just dawned on me, it almost sounds like there is a need for something almost like a Bitcoin decentralized approach to this, so that even if you are asked to provide stuff from your backend, or your backend provider is asked to, they can't because they don't know where it is, or they don't know what, judicial kind of regulations are applied to it, and so on. Anyway, I'm just kind of
Yeah. And
ran.
then encryption is other part of the solution also, that if you have only encrypted data and you have the keys, then you are way more secure from the threats of that you can say that the only encrypted stuff goes. But then you need to be really careful that you keep the keys and you keep the decryption
Right.
on your side, because if you move the keys temporarily there, somebody might store them still, even when you move them to the secure enclave. Maybe you could do so that it goes there encrypted and then you decrypt it there. But if you can decrypt it somewhere then else, then somebody can still duplicate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If one were to go out and, let's say we've done the audit that we spoke about earlier on, and you've sort of assigned a risk value to each one, are there like directories or suggestion tools for alternative providers for some of these things? So if he wants to find a new cloud compute, or he wants to find a new hosted database, are there ways of finding those?
Yeah, there's the European alternatives. I think that european-alternatives.com
Mm-hmm.
is the address where you can type in, let's say, Slack, and then it provides you, or you can say Cloudflare or some other service, and then it will provide you a number of different choices. They are not sort of carbon copies. They are not 100% mirrors of the system, but they solve certain or most or everything, depending on the case, of the service that you are sort of trying to replace.
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of the interconnectivity, how connected is that system within your internal IT is a sort of then that how hard it is to change. So again, if you work with open protocols, open data formats, then the change is easier than you would work with the cloud provider's own systems, because then you need to find a replica for those or replace. On the other hand, AI is now our friend, that we could say that, okay, here's a millions lines of code that is connects to this system. Now I want you to use this system, kindly rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
And it will. And it will be like a day or so. And then then you need to start testing and so forth. But it's a drastically different situation compared to like half a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of all the things, AI has given us, portability is maybe one of the most useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Cool. Well, we're nearly at time. We don't have any questions, unfortunately. Sadly, lots of people are having some connectivity problems. This is being recorded. It'll be up on YouTube, but it's also going to be here on Crowdcast on the same URL. So if you haven't been able to catch some of this, you can come back and you can watch it again. Again, apologies for that. It must be a technical problem with Crowdcast, but we'll get to the bottom of it. Let's do one more question, Janne. Let's talk about what the next 5-10 years looks like. I mean, I suppose a large portion of it is down to what happens with our relationships with America. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that some organizations have sort of woken up to the situation that you can't really trust it. That there's so I see that the culture, the values, and the others are drifting apart, and with the sort of expedited rate. And I'm not 100% sure whether that if the Democrats would be at the helm, would everything of that has been built, would it go away? Because they might say that this is actually pretty good, but we can always blame Trump if somebody complains about it. But we won't change it because it's good for our economy. So that kind of protectionism probably will linger there. The AI is an interesting question that we might lose everything because of the Americans controlling the AI, or it might be so that we use the AI to claim and build our independence in a year, and then that's about it. But I think that the crucial question for the data sovereignty that do we actually have can we build a sovereign hyperscale capable provider network, let's put this, or ecosystem that is sort of commercially viable and makes sense, and it actually could be even better that it would draw people in that are not interested about the politics, and they are not interested about the data sovereignty, but they just want to have the sleekest, easiest, cheapest solution for them. So that would be the sort of the good or best scenario, and the sort of the worst one is that we are sort of serfs to the Americans. There is a interesting thing that that we Europeans tended to conquer most of the world, and there's a lot of countries like in Africa, South America that are still paying the bill, and now we are sort of subject to same kind of thing. So is this that if it goes really wrong, are we paying the cost of this for the next 200 years?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, are we colonized digitally? In a sense, it would serve us right. There would be that kind of karma, poetic justice kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I would rather not see my kids living in that kind of situation. So that's not just the 10 more years, but the 50 years, 100 years, and so forth. So if we don't really take our control, the destiny back to our own hands, we might be sort of colonized, and then we pay the bills or we pay the cost of that for several generations, because it sort of hampers, and then hampers the economy and makes it less dynamic and so forth, and then we might see the effect for a really, really long time, because those kind of subtle changes might be actually long lasting, and for example change how we educate people, what we can afford, and so forth.
Well, on that note, let's wrap it up there. I think my perspective has changed on whether it is a valid concern right now. I can see there are economic reasons why it might be a necessity to start reducing that reliance on any country, not just America. I can also see how hard it's going to be for us as a community of leaders to kind of pull away from some of the easy commodity platforms and services that were so useful to get to that point. But I see the value in us doing it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the next year or two pans out. I see AI as a great enabler of this. We said earlier on that it's going to make portability much easier. It's also going to help us design how we might approach economic or financial discussions about which services we use. But yeah, we're gonna have to wait it out and see what happens. I agree with your point from right at the beginning. American offerings tend to be much more commercialized and Europeans tend not to commercialize and focus on the good of what they're doing. There probably needs to be some kind of rebalance there to make it work.
Yeah.
But it's
It should be
super
commercial rebalancing, not political. That is what I'm hoping, that we can actually pull this off as companies, as CTOs, and not as members of parliament.
Yeah, absolutely. Grand. If anybody would like to get in touch with Janne or have a look at his book, I'm just about to paste in his LinkedIn profile there. So do reach out. He's also a CTO craft member, so you'll see him in Slack if you're a Slack member. But other than that, just to say a huge thanks for Janne for getting involved and talking to us about this subject. It's super interesting, super relevant for the times we're in. Yeah, we will see you again soon. Thank you, Janne.
Thank you.
Grant. See you next time, everyone.